As a man thinketh. As a man thinketh. One of Unity's great authors, Imelda Shanklin, says this in The Quest, Eric Butterworth's book. She says, "Your mind is your world. Your thoughts are the tools with which you carve your life story on the substance of the universe. When you rule your mind, you rule your world. When you choose your thoughts, you choose results. Your life is what you think. Think straight, and life will become straight for you." Eric Butterworth says, "Is this a startling idea to you? It should be startling, even disturbing. It should shake you to the very foundation, for our lives are founded upon our dominant thoughts and habits." Our lives are founded on our dominant thoughts and habits. Well, if you were here for the last lesson, you realize we're entering the space where we are holding two possibly seeming opposing ideas. If you weren't here for the last lesson and didn't get it yet, go back and check it out. Last week, we talked about the idea that Unity leader Robert Brummett says, the mind thinks that's what it does. The mind thinks that's what it does. And we talked about some teachings that come from a spiritual practice of non-resistance, of not creating a space where we are paranoid about our thoughts or ideas, where we become superstitious about the law of mind action and think, if I say that, then this will happen, and if I say that, then I won't get this, because, oh my gosh, my thoughts are things and they create things, and that in fact, sometimes holding that state of consciousness and being in the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law is a light version of the practice. That in fact, this idea of the law of mind action, this idea that thoughts become things, is a very deep spiritual practice, and it has space for our divinity, our co-creativity, and it has space for our humanity. Because in fact, we can misapply the law and sit there and bump up against it and go, why isn't it working? It's not working for me. When in fact, we're using a manipulation of the law, not the law itself and the truth itself, because we're not going directly to source, honoring the fullness of our being, and we can sometimes demonize our thoughts. And when we demonize our thoughts, when we have a feeling or an emotion or a thought that comes up and we are so resistant to it, we are so fearful of it, that could not be me. My identity is to be this loving, beautiful being of awakened light. It is so Christed in its consciousness. It is so anointed and awakened, or I want it to be so, that anything other than that, I begin to build up a resistance to, I begin to be fearful of. And in fact, that fear can be a magnet in and of itself, right? And we can create a space of violence within. Jeff Foster, a mindfulness teacher, talks about the violence within. That if we have thoughts, if we have feelings, and we're so unable and unwilling to enter into a state of allowing with them, then we create violence within our own being. I'm not okay if I think like that. I'm not okay if that thought came. I'm not okay if that feeling came. And that, in fact, a liberation practice is breathing into what is and recognizing that the mind is more like a projector and a screen. The thoughts are what are coming from the projector. They can be positive, they could be negative, they could be violent thoughts, they could be peaceful thoughts, but it does not change the fabric of the screen they are projected on. That is the awareness. That is stable, that is unchanging, that is presence itself, and it doesn't make a screen violent or negative just because the negativity hits it. The screen knows its spiritual identity. Its identity is to be presence. That can be a little controversial in Unity if you take the teachings lightly and you just go to the surface and you go, ooh, my thoughts are things. If I say this word, then this will happen. Boom. But we all know, don't we, people that have had beautiful thoughts and bad things happen, things we would judge happen, and people that have awful thoughts, and it's like, well, that seems like good things are happening. So today is about diving into the other side. Last week we explored how do we be with our minds, knowing that the mind thinks that's what it does, that I don't need to create repression or metaphysical malpractice on myself or anyone else by entering a state of duality and entering a state of religion and resistance that is full of dogma and the letter of the law. I don't need to enter into a state of consciousness where I am at war with what is. Or like Eckhart Tolle says, the more you make your thoughts or your beliefs your identity, the more you're cut off from the spiritual dimension within yourself. So then how do we balance that? What is the other side of that practice and the depth of that practice? Well, we have all seen and experienced within ourselves that the mind is a broadcasting field. That the mind and the thoughts in the mind do matter, no? That they are actually creative, that thoughts are creative. Can you be with me in this holding of two seemingly opposing ideas? We've all seen how these broadcasting fields we can be in can change our own and change others' lives. We know that unity is principle. Thoughts held in mind create after their kind. The law of mind action, the law of attraction, is a real operative experience in this universe. Unity author Sig Paulson says that man is an unfinished product, a still growing creature, a God in enfoldment. He lives in a universe whose elements, including his own ignorance, first challenge his spirit, then yield to it. He has come through ages of bondage, ignorance, superstition, violence, and wars of all kinds. He has been a bull in a china shop of creation, yielding fantastic powers destructively in a dark night of preparation to become what he really is, the self-expression of the infinite. He has lived in a hell of separation, separation from his source, separation from his fellow man, separation from the good. Every element of his being cries out to experience. In sacred scripture, we learn about the power of thought. In Proverbs, it says, "Watch over your heart with all diligence. From it flows the springs of life." In Luke, it says, "The good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good. The evil man out of the evil treasures bring forth what is evil, for his mouth speaks from that which fills his heart." So there is this idea that our thoughts and our hearts are connected, that there is a creation center, and that in fact, if there is light there, then light comes from there. But if there is evil or ignorance or separation, an evil being just simply a separation from the light, a separation from love, a step in ignorance, and that ignorance creates harm, creates suffering, creates more separation, creates a state of consciousness that we could easily call hell. In Colossians, it says, "Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on earth." So that means set your mind on the realm of ideas, the realm of infinite and unlimited potential, the realm of the divine, the realm of source, the realm of pure energy. Not on circumstances, not on the limitation, the world of effects, the world of form. In Ephesians, it says to be made new in the attitude of your minds. That is what we're here for. We are here to be made new in the attitude of our minds. And finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Think about such things. So what does all of that lean to and lead to? If we take the idea that I can't just be afraid of my thoughts, that that's one element of creation, thoughts held in mind create after their kind. But if we look at the scripture and the reference to what is in our hearts, we recognize that the law talks about our full creative ability. That we take our thoughts, which are the words, the ideas in our heads, we take our thoughts, but it's not just our thoughts. It's our thoughts plus our emotion center, that feeling center, that feeling in our hearts where we make it come alive. And then what else happens when we continue this framework, this picture? We have a thought, we have an emotion, and we have a belief. So we have a trinity of creation, a thought, an emotion, a belief. And that becomes the heart from which we live. When we merge together our thoughts, our emotions, and our belief, we create a vibrational field, we create a consciousness. And in fact, it is through this consciousness, not only do we see, and it begins to frame things in our world, because, right, it begins to create a story. When we have an identity, when we create an identity and we have a thought, a feeling, and a belief, we create a story, and that story of our lives becomes the frame in which we see the world, in which our perception and our perspective goes out into the world. And what else does it become? It becomes a framework for what can come in to us. And what we can draw to us, like a magnet, like a portal, like a vibrational field, a little beam me up, Scotty, bring it in. And that's the depth of the practice. Notice that we don't say, thoughts in mind create after their kind. We say thoughts held in mind create after their kind. Thoughts held in mind. That holding is key. That holding is that I am swimming in a field, I am creating it. Everyone knows the difference, right, between themselves or anyone else being with an emotion, experiencing a thought, and being riveted to it. Being in vigilant agreement with it to such a degree that anything else could fly through your face, fly into your field, be an opportunity right in front of you, and you have your hands so firmly fixed, shaking this reality and making an agreement with it that you might not even see what just passed you by. That, friends, is a thought held in mind that creates after its kind. We can be so riveted to an identity of ourselves that is in form and in limitation that we create from it, no? A story begins to emerge from which we see and which we experience our world. And it's because we believe these stories. It's because we believe the thoughts. It's not that the thoughts themselves are bad. The thoughts themselves are powerless. Your word, though, your word is power. Your I am identity, what we attach to our I am, is power. And that which we hold is power. We all know the difference between someone that is experiencing something and letting it flow through them, but not believing it, not letting it be their full identity, not attaching to it, not, friends, wallowing in it. And then we all know times in our own lives where we had an experience and we had feelings or we had thoughts, and it's not just that we went, okay, there's a thought, I'm the screen. It's okay. Come in, sit down for as long as you need to, move through. But in fact, we just, this is so true, this is so real, this is the only reality, this is what it is. Woe is me. I'm holding it so strongly. It becomes me. It becomes the lenses that I put on my eyes. It becomes the filters that move over my ears. It becomes the clothing I put on my back. And it becomes the field of consciousness and co-creation that moves forth from my mouth. That is thoughts held in mind. The dominant energy field, the dominant thought that is so co-creative. So certainly, like Imelda Shanklin and Eric Butterworth said, we should be a little disturbed if we don't know that principle. And the day that we hear about that principle and we awaken to it, and the moments that we have where we go, I was doing that, I didn't realize it, are incredible. And there is a hallelujah chorus going, freedom! Because you realize I am not the effect of my mind, I am a creator. I was on my way to an appointment the other day, and I was running late. And as I was looking on my map for the 2 ways to get there, right, I wanted the fastest route, right? So I looked, and it gave me 2 routes. One was on the highway that I normally take, and the other one was a little bit of a back road that I had taken once or twice, but there was a turn there that I got turned around a little bit in. Like, even though it seemed obvious, whatever, I started going one way, and all of a sudden, here I am and backtracking and trying to get back on the road because it was less familiar. So as I'm looking at it, it says one route takes 30 minutes. That's the funky one, the road less traveled. And the other one took 33 minutes or 35 minutes. And I wanted those 3 to 5 minutes. I really wanted them. What do you think I did? Which route do you think I took? The fast one or the familiar one? I took the familiar one. I took the highway that said it would take longer, because it was familiar to me, and it assured me I will not get off track. I will not lose my way. I am not taking a risk in creating something different than what I am intending. Because if I took the other one, even though that might be the smoother way, that might be the better way, that might be the quicker way, it was less familiar. When we talk about the law of mind action, friends, we attract what's familiar. Because we have mind patterns, and we even know now about neuroscience, and we know that we have brain patterns, that we create grooves in a record, just like taking that route. The one that's familiar is the one that our minds go to. So when we have thoughts that are dominant thoughts in our minds, it can be hard to take another path because it's less familiar. In fact, in relationship studies, when they look at why do some people keep attracting, or however you want to say it, getting into relationships that aren't what their vision is, a lot of times they go back to looking at family of origin and patterns and consciousness. And if there were some dysfunctional patterns in consciousness, even though that's not what you're consciously looking for, the being feels so familiar in that field. It feels so familiar that it's like, soulmate, home, I know you. This feels like what I know. The mind creates grooves in the record. That's the bad news. The good news is we are the creator of the grooves. That's the good news. Thoughts held in mind create after their kind. In the book, Your Power to Be, Unity Minister Sig Paulson goes into the dominant states of mind when he says this. Or this. Hold on a second. Okay. He says, this is actually Eric Butterworth first. He says, each of us is constantly making himself what he is. Each of us is constantly making himself what he is. Unity reveals that our lives and affairs are completely influenced and shaped by the character of our thinking, that man is not limited by God's will or by heredity or environment or by fate or circumstances, but by his own dominant state of mind, but by his own dominant state of mind. And Unity minister Sig Paulson says this: who is this creature who probes the universe, unlocks its secrets, unhooks the elements of the atom, rearranges the face of the earth, and plans to fly to the unthinkable depths of space? Is it possible that deep within the mystery of his being, there are undiscovered secrets, unfathomed energies, unsuspected potentials? It is not likely that man has known as little of his own nature as he has known of the nature of the world in which he has been living. Can it be that man has been a sleeping God, ignorant of his own identity, just now beginning to awaken to his own role in the future development of the universe? Thoughts held in mind create after their kind. Once we identify when we're in a rut, when we have made a rut in the record, once we identify that, there are practical tools to engage a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of action. The work of Jerry and Esther Hicks talks about some of those tools. And in those principles, it has what seems the opposite of be okay with your thoughts. But what they teach is what Unity teaches. It's that when you find yourself soaking in a pool of thoughts that you're holding in a dominant state of consciousness, you don't need to sometimes do the practice of going so into them, feeling them, oh my gosh, how can I feel them so much? If you know what they already are, and you know that they're a pattern, they're a record, they're a rant in your own mind, the key is to simply step out. The key is to shift your consciousness, shift your vibration, shift your field, shift your awareness. So it's just to turn a corner. I was at the airport the other day, and there were these two little kids, a little girl probably 3 or 4 years old, and a little boy maybe 6. And as I was observing them in line, the little girl starts going up to her grandmother and starts whacking her purse, kind of hitting her a little bit and hitting her purse. And no one said anything. No one said, don't do it. No one had a conversation about this behavior that was probably a pattern emerging. The little boy, out of nowhere, probably not even consciously, just went up to her and just grabbed her and hugged her right across the neck like this bear hug, just hugged her. And at first she kind of squiggled a little bit. And he let her squiggle, and then he hugged her more. And as he hugged her more, you could just see herself, like you could just see her energy just relax. And they did it one more time. And when he did it the third time, she was like, Then he let go. Then he let go. Can we shift the field? The second tool is that we can use our minds and we can use our thinking ability, because the mind thinks that's what it does, right? When we find ourselves in states of anxiety, fear, anger, anything that is like, okay, here's the pattern again, I've identified the pattern, it can help, and this is what we know about neuroscience and brain science now that merges with our spiritual practice today, it can help to just start thinking of other things. Start shifting the brain pattern so that if there is a rut here, I'm going to interrupt it. So you start looking and saying, the seats are purple, there's banners on the wall, the clock is right there. You start identifying things, labeling things, maybe thinking of types of fruit, maybe thinking of brands of beer, or just generating thoughts in your mind. One of the greatest tools is to start making a gratitude list. They say, in fact, in science now, that it's not even necessary that you have to find the things you're grateful for, that in fact it changes your brain chemistry, it changes your patterns, if you even just try. And you just go right into a state of thinking about what you're grateful for. That, friends, is how we prune the patterns of negative thinking in our mind. And in fact, when we do this, it becomes like a deer trail in the woods. Once that trail is walked on and walked on and walked on and traveled, it's visible. But when you start going in a different direction, instead, when you notice the choice point and you start going in a different direction, you start going on a different path, the mind, while you are sleeping, prunes the negative neural pathways, the negative thinking centers, the ruts, and heals them, releases them, because they're no longer of use. And when they become less familiar, we take that road less frequently, and we begin to create a new story. Michael Beckwith says, have dominion over your awareness, and you'll have dominion over your destiny. And that little boy, after hugging his sister, played a little trick with her, and he said, I know what you have in your pocket. She goes, sunshine. So friends, I know what you have in your pocket. Sunshine. Namaste.